Greetings and salutations in our distance. This is Wolfphototech, and here we are with another delightful video. This time it's Dark Albion, the Rose War. This is a grim fantasy England in the 15th century by the RPG pundit in Dom Publishing. This book is a soft cover. There's also a hardcover version of this, but you cannot buy this You cannot purchase the hardcover version of this over Amazon. You have to go to DriveThruRPG or some other sites to buy the hardcover version directly from the company. But this is a OSR product that is based around the 15th century, England specifically, Dark Albion, the Rose War. And this is set as close as possible to true authentic medieval fantasy, not the sort of weird bastardized version that Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition does, which is actually a blend of high fantasy, low fantasy, and sci-fi. But anyways, you have some very delightful actual medieval artwork in here. This book was published, copyrighted is 2014 and 2015. As I said, this is a OSR product setting, which is compatible with Lamentations of the Flame Princess, Osric, and so forth. And Labyrinth Lord, Swords and Wizardry, etc., etc. However, it is meant to be primarily run with Lion and Dragon. You have this very nice double-page table of contents right at the front, with everything clearly marked out, like the introduction, Gazetteer of Albion, Kingdoms of the Continent, Law and Justice of Albion, History of Albion, Characters in Albion, Currency and Equipment section, Noble Houses of Albion, People of Interest, Sorcery and Secrets, Adventuring in Albion, and Dependencies. And they all break down into subsections like regions and price lists of equipment and wealth in Albion and noble house management and annual events and battles and so forth. And then you go from the table of contents to a handy-dandy index that takes you to all the very important places, such as Bangor, Burnet, Bath, Battle of Burnet, Caravan, Calais, Cambridge, Canterbury. As I said before, this Dark Albion setting is intended for primarily with OSR and Lion and Dragon, the game system. It is authentic, so this is actually all based around actual real-world events, but adjusted to as if there was actual magic and monsters in the world. I mean actual magic and monsters, but also as imagined by the people of the era. So, you're going to find that the magic system in the Lion and Dragon system and Dark Albion setting is more in line as if you were to study actual medieval history, is more accurate to what they believed magic operated under. There is a whole bunch of new artwork in this book set in the era, but there's also a bunch of classic artwork that is also reused. Very clearly decorative letters for all the beginnings of paragraphs and stuff like that. Nice artwork of various people from the actual era and structures to get an accurate understanding of what kind of characters you would be seeing in the world. This appears to be a woman right here, and she does actually have a sword with a bird in her hands. You got some demons and angels and basilicas and stuff like that. It states right here, magic is also different, because as I said before, this is based on actual magic believed to exist, not real world magic, but magic as it would have existed according to the perceptions of the people of the era in which this is set in. So, the RPG Pundit really put in a lot of effort in trying to keep this as close to the real world as possible and as close as possible to the perceptions of the people of the time as possible, within the adjustment of, like, you can't get overly intricate, otherwise the system gets really fiddly and people have difficult time of actually operating. But you have delightful artwork of various characters: a troubadour, a werewolf, a person attacking a small dragon, and so forth. And as I said, this is actually a fairly meaty book right here. This is just your campaign setting for the England. It's 277 pages. There's also a note on differences between this world and our historical world. Because as I said, you cannot have a one-to-one exact reconstruction in a RPG of real-world events. You have to modify them just for a brevity of the players and the game master. So there you go. This section is the Gazetteer of Albion. You have a map of Albion, which is England, as well as the neighboring areas. You got some classic artwork mixed in. It's actually a really beautiful book. It's easy to read. Everything is, you have nice big borders for people like me who have dyslexia, a mild dyslexia, and issues with various other things. It's actually not that hard to actually page through this and read it as you go along. The maps are fairly easy to look at as well. It's not overly complicated, yet it's actually meant to be held like this. This is actually London. Even on my terrible camera, you can actually make out... On my terrible camera, you can actually make out all the little buildings. There's ample space and a very good perspective on the orientation of all the little buildings. So it's actually quite useful. You got a beautiful picture right there. And it just keeps going. You got actual castle designs in here. And various other characters. I'm literally not going to show you everything in this book. But as I said, there is numerous maps, lots of details on the culture of the time. You got a nice hex map right here of a region, as well as a good example of a building or a tavern, and people living in the moment. You can see the white cliffs of Dover as well. And some more nice artwork. There is actually a pretty good amount of artwork and maps spread out through the entire book. So you're not going through huge sections of pages with nothing to look at, but you always have an example of something for inspiration or reference for your players. And being that this is actually based strongly around actual real-world events and places and the mythology that people had at the time, I say this is actually quite nice for people who really want to get into more historical tabletop role-playing. Yet again, another beautiful hex map right here. There is basically not a page that does not have a piece of artwork on it or a map. And sometimes, often, both. Everything is... All the paragraphs are started, as I said, with large decorative letters. So it's easy to track where you are, even for a person who has mild dyslexia like me. You have area on South York, Northern marches east. Yet again, you got little boxes down here talking about important areas on these maps. So each one of these maps has a little box down here that will tell you a little bit about major locations and population. Yet again, another beautiful piece of artwork and a map on this side. And this book I'm literally only to page 52, and it just keeps going. And as you can see, it's immaculately set together. There's a section on Pembroke and Principality of Wales. I mean, if you really want to really play authentic medieval tabletop role-playing, actual authentic medieval tabletop role-playing, but it's not overly complicated, and you're happy with the OSR setup, this is definitely a beautiful book to pick up. And it's not terribly expensive either. All these books in this whole series is actually quite reasonable on your pocket. And for the sheer amount of information you get, it's ridiculous. Got a lizard person right here. Kingdoms of the Continent. So this whole first section was basically introduction and Albion, which is England, and then you got Kingdoms of the Continent, which is all the other kingdoms around Albion. So you have Albion right here, and then you have Iberia, Frogland. Frogland is France, by the way. Burgundy, Principalities, Commonwealth, Huntland, Borderlands. Frogland is literally where the French are, and he literally has them as the lizard person is actually a frog person, so it's funny. But I don't think they're actually frogs. Are they? There's a bigger double page map. This is Albion right here, England, and all the other places in this setting book. So you just don't get just information on Albion. You get a whole bunch of stuff about the neighbors as well. You got Viking rowboats. You got interesting designs for houses of the era. It's just loaded. It just keeps going. Full page piece of artwork. Put it really close. Everything is not overly done, but it's still highly detailed. Some stuff is more detailed than others. Like that is quite detailed. This section is Laws and Justice in Albion. So this goes over the legal system in which Albion runs on, which is actually kind of neat. If your characters get into the whole murder hobo thing, they're into a rude awakening, as this book actually outlines exactly what happens when you break laws and how to get out of them. You have another section on the history of Albion, as I said before, which yet again, it goes through early history, the dark times, modern history, and so forth. So you can actually project your way through various events. Future of Albion section. So everything that goes from the 15th century forward. It all breaks down into like what happens in the year 1456, what happens in the year 1457, 1458, 459, 1459, 1460, 1461, 1462, and it just keeps going and going. As I said before, each and every page has artwork galore on it. And numerous maps in slightly different variations. It goes through the 1470s, 1480s, and then ends out in like the back end of 1480. Yeah, it ends in 1485. You got a section on characters in Albion. This goes over the social class system, races, aristocracy, villain, lordly nobilities, prior events table, home territory, and so forth. It just keeps events subtable. It's a 1d10 table where you can roll out for events like local hero lost at sea, prosperous family, Renaissance person, saved a lord, etc., etc. Goes into a little bit about the classes and the Albion names. Got yourself a nice set of tables for names for men, women, and etc., etc. English names, Scots names, Welsh and Khmeri names, and so forth. You got a beautiful section on currency and equipment. You have lots of tables and illustrations of various items. Characters in the garb of the era, and so forth. Then you go into noble houses. Battles. As I said, the artwork changes up a little bit here and there. Peoples of interest. So this basically goes over the various individuals of nobility and of high standing in society, like knights, kings, queens, princes, princesses, various lords, dukes, and so forth. Gives you their coat of arms. That is actually a rather nice thing that they include. That's something that's kind of been lost in Dungeons and Dragons. At one point in time, back in I think it kind of died out in 3rd edition, where there actually was coat of arms. That was more of a Greyhawk thing. Like, I can pull out the Greyhawk Gazetteer here, and I could flip through here and this is a third edition, and you only get it in the back end of the book in nice color. Yeah. There's various other books from 3rd edition and 3.5 that have coat of arms for various nobilities and culture, but that's the end of the road for that. So there you go. You got just tons and tons and tons of stuff like that. Sorcery and Secrets. This goes more in depth into the magic system of Dark Albion. And that, by the way, this is not the magic system of Dungeons and Dragons. He has made a strong point of really making it really in line with actual medieval magic as it was perceived back then. Like summoning demons and everything else. Actual demon summoning scene. Whole section on summoning demons. With actual artwork from the era and post that era. Of that era. Magic item creation rules. You have actual magic item creation tools in here. Alchemical concoctions. So you have magic item creation tools. You got medicine. You got poison. You got a whole section on poisons. You got a little section on medicines. Actual medicines like hare's ear, horn hound, make bait, merjom, alchemy. A little short section on alchemy right here. And seeing as this is actually very much based on actual medieval beliefs of the senses of magic, poisons, medicine, alchemy, you could actually go and get actual medieval books and books that are based or studies around actual medieval culture, and you can incorporate that into this and expand it out. You got a section on various creatures. You got an encounter table right here. Towns and cities. Got a little section on talking about monsters, thieves, contracts, ancient tombs, adventure locations. Got a little map for an actual little dungeon right here. And so and so forth. Some more maps. Some actual critter stuff. And it just keeps going and going. Maps of actual castles. Sections of wall. Got a section on appendice section, which covers all the little side details like future Knights of the Star with death dates and so forth. A little section on house rules and for various classes, items, and so forth. You got a section that actually references another book that he has also wrote as well. Fantastic Heroes and Witchery. Section on more character race information. Little additions. And it just keeps going. This section seems to actually be a tie into Fantastic Heroes and Witchery. So I'm going to have to pick up that book now and actually go through that. Albion as low magic. Albion's cosmology. New spells, summoning magic section from the Fantastic Heroes and Witchery book. And then the OGL notice. I do say this is actually a amazing book for reference how thick it is compared to my finger. Dungeon Master's Guide from 5th edition. Keep in mind that the Dungeon Master's Guide is a hardcover, or the Dark Albion book, The Rose War, is a softcover. So you can see that the Rose War book, being a softcover, is almost as thick as the Dungeon Master's Guide. Fun thing about hardcovers, they are artificial. They seem to be almost thicker, but that's literally just because of the thicker cover. So they're about the same thickness. This was like 270 pages, were 320 pages for the Dungeon Master's Guide for 5th edition. So 5th edition beats it out by slight in thickness. I am actually rather reluctant to actually give this a rating because I have yet to actually get around to actually playing it. However, there's so much stuff in here, and this is all OSR compatible. The primary system being the Lion and Dragon. It's actually quite neat. Oh, by the way, you got 3 lions up there. If anyone knows history of TTRPGs and where a lot of the inspiration came from, you got it right there. So there you go. I'm probably placing this in like the high 3-star, basically almost 4-star territory. That's just a preliminary score for it. I really have to actually get around to actually running this whole system for my groups. That way I can actually firmly state that, yeah, this is amazing. But this is just loaded with stuff. And so if you really wanted to like make a world setting that is more authentic to the medieval world, this is a great book to pick up straight up. So even if you're not playing Lion and Dragon, this is probably a really great resource. There's also another book that's an actual adventure for Dark Albion. And then you have another book that actually goes into deeper depth on cults and magic in Dark Albion. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed this video and have a delightful day, a nice night, a wonderful week, and a magnificent month. And see you next time.